The blizzard had swallowed everything. Fences vanished. Trees bowed low under the weight of white silence. The sky pressed close, gray and heavy, like it didn't want to let go. Clara Whitmore had just finished nailing the last of the shutters when she heard it. A sound that did not belong. Not the wind tearing across the valley. Not the ice cracking loose from the roof. Not the old barn groaning its age in protest. No, it was higher, faint, fragile, human. A cry barely carried over the roar of the storm, like a whisper lost in a canyon. Her breath formed clouds in the cold air, hands tightening around the rough wood of the shutter. Then she heard it again, closer this time, trembling like a heartbeat breaking through the gale. Without hesitation, she yanked her coat tighter, threw open the door and plunged into the white. The wind clawed at her as if it were punishing her for stepping outside. Step by step, she moved by instinct rather than sight, boots crunching over ice and frozen memory. 10 steps past the paddock, her foot caught and she nearly tumbled. There, half buried in snow, wrapped in faded red cloth, a small bundle shivered. It stirred and cried again, a soft horse-like wail. Clara dropped to her knees, heart hammering. A baby, barely breathing, skin pale and cold as stone, a thin slash on the forehead, frozen blood dark and brittle. The cloth around it bore patterns she knew, Comanche symbols, handmade and sacred. Her hands moved before thought, lifting the child against her chest, drawing the warmth she could give like a desperate shield, and she ran. The next 3 days passed in a blur of storm, wind, and vigilance. The shadow of the ridge brought warning, mounted warriors appearing as phantoms on the horizon, but Clara never left the porch. She did not sleep, did not eat. Her arms ached, her back screamed, but instinct guided her every movement. She adjusted the blanket over the tiny body, pressed cool cloths to the fevered forehead, whispered lullabies she hadn't used in years. At first light, the child stirred with a weak, almost inaudible cry, and Clara let herself exhale. She had survived the storm. He had survived the storm. Outside, the world was white and brutal. Fences gone, trees splintered, the windmill leaning like a drunkard. Inside, she changed the baby's wrappings, slow and precise, eyes scanning every bruise and gash. The temple bore a dark scar, the arm several minor abrasions, but the necklace drew her gaze like a warning. Carved bone on leather, unmistakably Comanche, a symbol of protection and lineage. Her late husband had traded with their people before the war, a memory now bitter with loss and caution. Footsteps echoed in her awareness. One horse, then another, a familiar figure emerging from the haze. Eustace Carter, her neighbor, frowning, 30 years of habit etched into his sharp face. "Clara," he said, voice tight. "You all right?" Roof caved in. She kept her composure, eyes never leaving the infant. "I'm fine," she said, voice steady but taut. "Thought I saw tracks near your place," he pressed. She offered no answer beyond a shrug. "Just snow," she murmured. He gave a slow nod and left, scanning her cabin one last time before disappearing into the storm. That night, the baby would not settle. Hunger and cold were not the cause. Fear, perhaps, or the ghost of what had been lost. Clara held him close, pacing circles through the cabin, murmuring songs her mother once hummed, tunes she had thought vanished. His tiny fingers curled around her shirt, grasping as if to tether himself to life itself. On the second day, Mary Finch arrived, tall and brittle, concern etched into every line of her face. "Storm break your fence?" she asked, glancing toward the fields. Clara smiled faintly, shook her head, and received the bread and words offered, closed the door without another word. Outside, the clouds darkened, carrying portents that only the wind seemed to understand. Clara could not hide him forever. The child had clung to her finger with a grip that betrayed his fragile age. His wide, dark eyes followed her every movement, watching, learning, anchoring her to life once more. She sharpened the kitchen knife that night, moved the rifle from the mantel to the table, loaded it with deliberate care, and waited. The wind shifted after midnight. In the deep frozen dark, hoofbeats sounded. 3 riders emerged through the pre-dawn mist, shadows moving like ghosts, silent, purposeful. One dismounted, moving not toward the house but the chicken coop, hand skimming the snow. Clara's pulse spiked, yet he did not see her, did not take what he came for. Instead, he bowed to her window, then vanished as silently as he had appeared. She whispered to the baby, "They know you're here, and they didn't take you yet." By the 3rd day, the threat of discovery became undeniable. Hooves roared across the ridge, hundreds of warriors silhouetted against the storm-dulled sun. At their head rode a man in a red cloak, braids swinging over broad shoulders, a scar lightning tracing his jaw. He dismounted 50 yards from the cabin, walked the last stretch alone, and stopped. Clara stayed on the porch, the baby clutched to her chest. His voice, calm but resonant, finally broke the quiet. "You saved my son." She nodded, words unnecessary. The child had been left, not by mistake but by mercy, and she had answered the call of blood in her own way. "Will you give him back to me?" he asked. Her answer came slow and deliberate. "Will you take him if I say no?" His gaze held her, steady, unyielding. "No, you did not lose him. You brought him back." The baby stirred, silent tears hidden beneath furrowed brows. The man reached forward, touching the boy's foot reverently, then replaced the necklace around his neck with one of his own. "I give him a new name," he said. "And I give you a new name too." "What name?" Clara asked, brow raised. "Mother who hears," he replied. The key. Warriors mounted and dispersed, leaving Clara on the porch with a quiet ache, the baby asleep, the warmth between them heavy and unspoken. Clara's nights became vigilance and ritual. She tended to the hearth, fed the baby, and kept her hands always on the weapon she might need. Visitors came and went, neighbors bringing bread, a cousin in labor calling for her aid. Clara never hesitated, hands skilled and calm, saving lives as if guided by instinct older than herself. Recognition came slowly, gestures of thanks from the world that didn't see her sacrifices. Weeks passed, seasons shifted, and the valley grew quiet again. Yet the boy's presence lingered in the small tokens he left. Ribbons on trees, moccasins embroidered in white and gold, sketches pinned above the mantel, a shawl she had sewn with crooked stitches red as desert stone. Clara understood her life had intertwined with theirs in a way deeper than blood. The Comanche came not as threats but as silent watchers, teaching her patience, respect, and the quiet bonds that tie worlds together. One November morning the boy returned, barefoot, taller, braids in his hair, holding the hand of the woman who had first brought him back. He walked to her, hands on her skirt, whispering a single word, "Ma." Clara fell to her knees, held him tight, whispered, "I hoped you'd come back standing." He laughed, a sound that filled every empty corner of her house. 3 nights they stayed, sharing silence, warmth, and gentle lessons. The boy understood his dual lineage, holding his heart against hers, asking softly, "Then I have 2 hearts?" "Yes," she replied, "and 2 homes." Clara's valley became a place of quiet miracles. Seeds were planted and grew, fires burned, and life continued in measured rhythm. The boy's presence was in the small things, feathers tucked into crevices, stones carved with shapes that echoed memory, and the occasional whispered laugh on the wind. And though the Comanche departed, leaving the valley once again to her hands alone, Clara never felt lonely. She had lived between worlds, saved a life, and discovered that home was a choice, not a place. Years later, when she passed, she was laid to rest beneath the pines by the creek. A single word carved into the wood marked her legacy, Ma. She had held life, had nurtured it, and taught that family is forged in care, courage, and the quiet steadfastness of those who answer cries no one else hears. The snow softened into a dull, slushy quiet by midday. The world outside looked like it had survived a war. Fences buried, broken, trees bent and shattered, and the windmill at the edge of the field leaning drunkenly westward. Clara changed the baby's wrappings again, slow and deliberate, inspecting every bruise and cut. The small gash on his temple, the abrasions along his arm, and the carved bone necklace drew her attention constantly. The child's eyes, wide and dark, seemed to understand more than any infant had a right to, following her, movements with careful focus. He had already learned trust in the face of chaos, a lesson Clara felt heavy in her chest. Eustace Carter returned briefly that evening, cautious and suspicious, lingering outside the porch. He squinted past the windows, watching the cabin like a hawk. Clara did not move, did not blink, her hands clutching the baby's shawl. Finally, he gave a slow nod and rode off, leaving only silence and the faint scrape of hooves fading into the snow. That night, the baby would not stop crying. Hunger and cold were not the cause. Fear, perhaps, or memory clinging to the fragile lines of life. Clara paced the small room, holding him close, whispering songs her mother had hummed decades ago, songs she herself had used to soothe her own child years before he was taken by fever and war. The infant's fingers curled around her shirt, small talons of need, and she let them anchor her to purpose she had not felt in 5 long years. The storm raged outside, roaring through the mountains, but within the cabin, Time narrowed to two hearts, one fragile, one determined, beating together. On the second day, Mary Finch arrived again, bringing bread wrapped in cloth, her tall frame leaning forward as if to lean into the warmth of the cabin. Concern and curiosity radiated off her in equal measure. "Storm break your fence?" she asked, eyes flicking toward the snowy fields. Clara accepted the bread with a faint smile, her gaze already returning to the infant. Mary's sharp smile softened, then disappeared, and she left without further questions, leaving only the echo of winter outside. Clara's nights became a ritual of vigilance. She sharpened the kitchen knife, checked the rifle, laid the tools of survival within reach. She moved by instinct, her eyes scanning the darkness for movement, her ears attuned to the smallest sound. Somewhere in the night, hoofbeats broke through the howl of wind. 3 riders, shadows emerging from pre-dawn mist, one dismounted, gliding silently toward the chicken coop, hand brushing snow in a path only he could read. He did not see her. He did not take the child. He bowed once to the window, and just as quietly he vanished. Clara held the infant close, whispering into the warmth of the shawl, "They know you're here, and they didn't take you yet." By the third day, the reality of the Comanche's presence could no longer be ignored. Hooves thundered across the ridge, hundreds of warriors moving in perfect silence. At their head rode the red-cloaked man, broad shoulders and long braids swinging with every stride of his horse. He dismounted 50 yards from Clara's porch, walking the distance alone with deliberate steps. Clara remained where she was, heart in her throat, the baby nestled against her chest. He spoke, voice calm and steady, yet carrying the weight of authority. "You saved my son." She nodded, unspoken understanding passing between them. He acknowledged what she had done, the life she had preserved. "Will you give him back to me?" he asked. Her gaze met his, unwavering. "Will you take him if I say no?" His eyes did not waver. "No," he said simply. "You did not lose him. You brought him back." The child stirred, small, almost imperceptible movements, as if he understood the conversation but had no words. The man reached forward, touching the boy's foot reverently, then replaced the carved bone necklace around his neck with one of his own, brighter, newer, symbolic. "I give him a new name," he said. "And I give you a new name too." Clara raised an eyebrow. "What name?" "Mother who hears," he replied. The warriors mounted, moving away silently, leaving Clara on the porch with only the warmth of the infant in her arms and a quiet ache of connection that could not be measured in words. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clara continued her vigilance, tending the hearth, preparing food, and caring for those who arrived in need. A cousin in labor, women with questions, neighbors bringing supplies. Clara moved through them all with calm precision. She did not wait for gratitude. The act itself was reward enough. The valley grew quiet again, but the child's presence lingered in small tokens. Ribbons on trees, moccasins embroidered in white and gold, sketches pinned above the mantel, and the shawl she had sewn with crooked red stitches. Weeks passed, and Clara's bond with the child deepened. Seeds were planted, fires burned, and life unfolded in quiet increments. The Comanche visited rarely, silent watchers from the ridge teaching her patience, respect, and understanding. The boy grew, walking first, then running, learning the subtle ways of two worlds. Clara observed, always present, providing the warmth and stability he needed. The bridge between the life he had been spared and the life he would inherit. One November morning, the boy returned to her, barefoot, taller, braids swinging, holding the hand of the woman who had first brought him back. He approached, small hands resting on her skirt, whispering a single word, "Ma." Clara dropped to her knees, embraced him tightly, and whispered, "I hoped you'd come back standing." He laughed, a pure sound that filled every empty corner of her cabin. 3 nights they shared, a quiet communion of presence, silence, warmth, and gentle lessons. He asked the questions only a child with 2 hearts and 2 homes could ask. "Did I come from your belly?" Clara placed her hand on his chest. "You didn't come from here," she said softly, "but from here," tapping her own heart. "Then I have 2 hearts," he said, and she held him closer. "Yes, and 2 homes." Seasons passed. Clara's valley became a sanctuary of quiet miracles. Tobacco plants grew, fires burned in hearths, and life unfolded in slow, deliberate rhythm. The boy's presence was everywhere. Feathers tucked into corners, stones carved with symbols, whispers of laughter on the wind. The Comanche had left, but Clara felt their influence in every lesson, every act of care every patient moment with the child. She had learned that family was not only blood, it was love, choice, and the courage to save and nurture life. Years later, Clara prepared her home for winter, planting seeds gifted by the war chief, wild tobacco and herbs. She tended them carefully, watching them grow as the boy's laughter echoed in memory. The child had become a symbol of the bridges built between worlds, of love and trust forged under hardship, of courage measured not in battle but in care. The valley thrived quietly, life continuing in its rhythms. But Clara never forgot the nights of snow, the fear, the cry of life against death, and the unwavering gaze of the child she had saved. Spring arrived slowly in the valley, not with fanfare but with the gentle persistence of warmth creeping into every frozen corner. Clara rose early, carrying water from the creek, her hand steady though her heart held memories that pressed like stones. The boy's absence left a hollow echo, but her home remained alive with the small rituals they had shared. Each morning the cornbread loaves sat in their places, one for the table, one for the creek stone, a quiet bridge to the past and a testament to care. The tobacco seeds gifted by the Comanche chief had grown into sturdy stalks, their green tips brushing against the sunlight streaming through her cabin windows. Clara would handle them each morning, tracing her fingers along the leaves, feeling the pulse of life she had helped nurture. Even without the child beside her, the valley seemed to remember, holding the memory of his presence in the wind that pressed softly against her face as she worked. One morning she found a stone tucked near the creek, carved in delicate shapes of a bird in flight. It was familiar, echoing the drawings he had left on animal hide months ago. Clara held it close, closing her eyes and feeling the warmth of small hands pressed against her chest. The valley was quiet but not empty, filled with the invisible threads of memory, love, and care. Weeks passed and the child's visits became sporadic, unannounced but intentional. Each arrival carried a sense of purpose, not of obligation. One crisp morning, she heard hooves not from the ridge but from the woods behind her land. 3 riders approached, quiet and deliberate. The woman in blue, the one who had first returned him, dismounted and approached Clara's porch. Their eyes met, carrying volumes unspoken. He was sick, the woman said. Fever from the wound. We feared it would take him, but he lived. He called for you. Clara's heart clenched, words unnecessary. She nodded, understanding in silence. The boy was returned to her arms, bundled in the familiar red shawl. His tiny fingers grasped her hand, a quiet assertion of trust and recognition. Clara sank to her knees, holding him like fire, feeling life's fragility and resilience intertwined. That night, the camp stayed just beyond her land. 3 small tents, a fire glowing. Like a pulse, nothing more. She brought stew and warm water, sharing no words with the warriors, only the presence of warmth and attention. It was enough. They accepted her silently, the line between worlds delicate but acknowledged. The next morning, the warriors left, the child riding with his father once more. Clara's arms felt the absence keenly, but she no longer mourned in panic. She had learned that love is not possession. It is preservation, guidance, and quiet letting go. The shawl remained in her cabin, a talisman of the bond forged in storms and snow. Summer arrived quickly, golden light stretching across the valley. Crops flourished, and Clara moved through the days with a gentle rhythm. She continued baking cornbread, leaving 1 loaf at the creek as always, the ritual unbroken. Life's pattern grounded her, giving shape to the invisible threads of memory that connected her to the child, the Comanche, and the quiet miracles of survival and care. One day, she discovered a note left at her door tied with a frayed red ribbon. Inside, a carved bird in snow, a simple message of presence. Clara held it in her palm, feeling the echo of small hands, laughter, and trust. She understood without words that he remembered, that he knew her care had been unwavering. That knowledge was enough to anchor her heart. The valley grew warmer, and Clara's work in the fields and garden continued. Each act of tending, each seed planted, every loaf baked, carried the echo of the child and the lessons he had imparted. She moved slower, not from age or fatigue, but because she had learned that nothing precious could be rushed. Patience was the currency of love, care, and connection. Autumn arrived like a quiet shift in light, shadows stretching longer across the dirt road. The boy did not return physically, but his presence lingered in tangible reminders. The shawl, the drawings, the carved stones, and the faint laughter that seemed to ride on the wind. Clara tended her garden, fed the animals, and moved through the valley with a calm and deliberate grace. Her life was no longer just survival. It was stewardship, memory, and quiet joy. Then one November morning, Clara found a letter pressed between the door frame and post, held by a small carved stone. The handwriting was rough, uneven, but deliberate, 5 words. "I miss you, Ma." She held the letter, feeling the weight of years and the tenderness of connection across time and distance. Her eyes did not water and her lips did not quiver. She simply held the note close, folding it into her dress pocket, carrying it like a relic of enduring love. Weeks later, a knock at the door brought the boy, no longer swaddled, standing tall beside the woman in blue. His hands reached for her skirt, his eyes bright and full of recognition. Clara dropped to her knees, holding him tight, whispering, "I hoped you'd come back standing." He laughed, a sound of pure joy and belonging. They stayed together 3 nights, the child, sleeping in his old cradle the first night, then on the floor beside her bed the next. They shared meals, stories, and silences, bridging the worlds he belonged to. The woman offered herbs, stories, and dried fruits, but no ceremony. Their connection required no ritual. Presence alone sufficed. The boy asked questions only a child of 2 worlds could ask. "Did I come from your belly?" Clara placed her hand over his heart. "You didn't come from here," she said softly, "but from here," tapping her chest. "Then I have 2 hearts," he said, and she held him closer. "Yes, and 2 homes." His understanding was innate. The clarity of a life lived between choice and blood, survival and nurture. When they left, Clara did not ask their destination. The boy turned once, holding up a stone carved with a bird in flight. "I'll bring you more," he said. And he did. Each winter, each spring, small gifts appeared. Carved stones, feathers, drawings, tokens of memory, affection, and presence. Clara planted the seeds, tended the tobacco, burned small bundles at dusk, letting the smoke curl as a reminder of enduring connection, not as prayer, not as plea, but as witness. Clara never married again. She never left the valley, yet her life was full, rich with purpose, ritual, and the quiet evidence of love preserved. When she died many years later, she was laid to rest not in the churchyard, but in a circle of stones beneath the pine trees near the creek. Her grave bore a single word, "Ma," and the valley remembered. The wind carried the echoes of her care, her courage, and the bond forged across the storm. The shawl remained, the stones remained. The laughter and whispers lingered like ghosts of warmth, and if one were to stand in Clara's valley, beneath the pines and the lingering memory of snow and storms, one could still hear a single word echoing through the air. "Ma."